Welcome to Lead Wisely by Wonder Tour. Today we are talking about the movie Ready Player One, and we're going to kick ourselves off here with a tough question about leadership. Why is it so appealing for us to escape to a virtual world? Drew, what do you think?
That's a really good one. And it starts out right at the beginning of the movie. In Ready Player One, we get this voiceover that at some point in this dystopian history, people stopped trying to solve the world's problems and started trying to outrun them. And doesn't it feel a little bit like that is the case in our world today? And it probably always has been so. It's not crazy to think that that was still the case before we had all this advanced technology. But I do think that we still should consider this question, why escape instead of address your problems face on, instead of going and solving real problems for real people? And we're not so simple as to think that we should just throw away any concepts of a digital or virtual world and go back to the Stone Ages. But really, the idea of it being appealing to escape, why? Because it's easier a lot of times. I think that's the starting point. Like, that's why we do it, because I can either go face this terrible problem that I've created for myself. In this situation, we see people in Ready Player One who have a mountain of debt that they've created or something like that. And that mountain of debt kind of exists also inside the Oasis, but to some extent they're able to, or at least they think that they're going to be able to get around that. We see IROC. He has this character who is just this master of the Oasis, of the game, and he plays by no rules except the ones that are like explicitly enforced by this virtual world. And he does it because he's good at it, and by having no morals or ethics or anything like that in this virtual space, he can become a god, basically, and he can do almost anything. It seems like he can't die. But I think really for humans, it's so appealing for us because we're able to hide things in a virtual world. We're able to pretend things don't exist. And I know that that's challenging, and I know that it feels like a stab to me sometimes, because there's times that I want to hide things, and there's times that I don't want to be fully transparent or be fully vulnerable about what I've been through. But even just looking at Wade Watts in this movie, I think we can all relate to him. Like, sometimes we want to put on a different face and a different name and just not have to live through the pain that we've been through in the past, and not have to, live in the stacks in Columbus, Ohio or whatever. And he can be this other character, Parzival, instead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start this conversation, is the appeal of that glossier, beautiful, louder, noisier, faster other world, right? That is so much cooler than the reality that you're stuck with, or that we feel like we're stuck with sometimes. So yeah, I think that's a really great place to kick this off. So before that, we'll introduce ourselves briefly. I'm Brian Nutwell.
And I'm Drew Perot.
And we are on a journey to become better leaders by touring fantastic worlds and inspiring lore by going on a Wonder Tour.
We connect leadership concepts to story context because it sticks to our brains better. You can find out more at wondertourpodcast.com.
Yeah, so go back to what you just said here, Drew. So, of course, both of us have spent significant amounts of time in our lives watching escapist movies and playing immersive video games. And as the technology gets better and better, and I'm sure at some point I'll get to the putting on a virtual headset and running on an omnidirectional treadmill, right? I can see this happening. But this is an option we have, right? The technology is getting to the point where you can technologically immerse yourself in it. You can have images and sounds and even some tactile interface that kind of feels like you're having a real experience. And that makes it easier and easier for you to just like completely go in and not only enjoy the environment that you're in, but kind of buy into the environment you're in, buy into the rules of it, right? And so we see this rabbit hole. We see this first trap of technology, of the trap of escapism, in the MMOs, right? Or games like a Diablo or Clash of Clans or World of Warcraft or any of the more modern variants, where you can play it so that it is important to you in your personal life with your personal time to get better and better at the game, right? You can, and so you get all these crazy things where not only can you spend hours and hours logged in, sort of grinding your way and leveling up, because there's this incredibly appealing sense of progress. There's always one more goal. There's always one more cool little widget to get. There's always one more battle to win. But we see this gets to the ridiculous extreme of then, oh, well, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to pay somebody to do that. So now we have people that are, bot farmers and grinders who will, loot grinders who you can buy a character from, or you can pay them to take and log in your character and do all the onerous tasks that it takes to get better at a video game, right? So you start to develop this. I've so bought into the rules of the video game that not only will I spend my precious personal time doing unpleasant things in the video game to get slightly better at it, but I will spend my personal real world money and resources to pay somebody else to do unpleasant things in the video game so I can get slightly better at it. It's a really interesting trap of escapism. So what's been your experience with this?
Oh yeah, I've definitely been through that trap of escapism from being a kid and playing RuneScape and World of Warcraft, those massively multiplayer RPGs, to more recently, the last time that I played a game that was this immersive was probably playing Diablo 2 when it was re-released. And at some point you reach the point where you remember why you told yourself before, at least if you're me, I'm never playing one of these again. Because like you said, the loot grind, you just eventually become one of the bots, basically. You're just a human who's operating just like these machines are, just going to grind loot. Like you said, perfect, right in the heart. Like, oh, you spend money to buy gear because you're like, oh, like this will make my character better. And it's like, and what is the purpose of making your character better? And didn't you just, you just shortcutted all of the effort that you were trying to put in anyway, which was maybe the only good thing out of all of this was like that you were being determined and that you were putting forth effort into something. And like, these are good skills. So again, we're not saying that there's not skills to be learned. And like now, I'm sure I'll kick myself later for something about this, but like, I really like playing strategy games and card games and stuff like that, because usually they're interactive with other people. And you're able to like pick up things that I then turn around and like I apply them to business. I'm like, oh yeah, if I squint, like the way that I look at this building this deck can actually be applied to the way that we look at constructing this operating model or something like that. But yeah, I've had that experience, Brian.
so let's bring it back to Ready Player One, right? So Ready Player One presents us with this, glossy Hollywood example of this, but it's great. The stated intention of the Oasis, our fabled founder character Halliday, creates the Oasis to allow anybody to do anything that they want, to be anybody they want to be. They can be a different sex. They can be a flying insect. They can be a giant mech. They can have adventures they want to have. They can climb Mount Everest with Batman. They can ski down the pyramids. Like there's all these crazy things that you can do. And that's very much the appeal of a lot of the games and technology toys that we play with. And what we see happening in this movie is the same, is an exaggerated version of what we see happening in life, is that what people choose to do with that is like, oh, I could do anything, and so what I'm going to do is join this giant company and turn into a gold farming grunt with a number on my chest and just do the same thing over and over again, like importing all the rules and structure and limitation of the real world into the game. Whether because we choose to do that of our own volition because we just like patterns and safety, or whether because that's in anything that gets monetized, some big company is going to come in and try to impose some order that allows it to make more money. But it's really interesting, like what we see in this game is that's many people falling into this trap, or what we see in this movie is many people falling into the trap of, I'm going to the Oasis where I could be anything and I'm choosing to be literally interchangeable, identical human to other humans.
And isn't that what prolonged death really is for humans, right? It's this just standardization of everything, no uniqueness, and everybody becomes this slave to the system. And it's like, so we surpassed doing that in real life to some extent in order to create that in a game. And that's exactly how I felt like a year or two ago, or whenever I was playing Diablo 2. And I was like, wait a second, if my personal purpose in life is to help people to achieve freedom, and yet I'm here playing this game for multiple hours a day on average, like using my free time this way versus using my free time to learn and grow and help other people to do the same, what am I really doing with my life?
Right. Well, and part of the appeal, like the reason that it works, but also the reason that it gets very, can get very monotonous, or you can get kind of dragged into the grind of it, is that it's like we said, everything is cranked up to 11. when we first started playing video games, we're of the generation that early video games were pretty crude, right? They were blocky, they were pixelated, they were slow, they were, but even then, even when we first had video games, you had movies like Tron where people are fantasizing about being fully immersed in the beautiful glossy digital video game. Now we're to the point where the games are much closer to photorealistic. And what the image that we're seeing in the Oasis is that the virtual world, this optional video game world, is portrayed as much glossier and sexier and, more neon and more beautiful and bigger explosions, and everything is ridiculous. Like everything is cranked up to 11. And so on the one hand, it makes reality seem kind of drab and flat. But on the other hand, when everything escalates and escalates and escalates, eventually it's just not that impressive, right? You just can't get excited about anything new anymore if everything is possible and everything is extraordinary.
It's the law of diminishing returns, right? The more you do something, the less it satisfies. So if you, like you said, if you've climbed a cliff a million times, then the only thing that can make it better is to climb the cliff with Batman. So you have to, and then once you've climbed it with Batman, what's next?
Right? Yeah. So, and I feel like some of that is because these challenges are empty in and of themselves, right? Just climbing ever steeper cliffs, especially in a virtual world where you're just doing it by clicking buttons, right? Like it doesn't, at some point you've mastered the clicking of the buttons part and you're not really learning anything. You're not really accomplishing anything new, but you're also, clearly not making any impact in the real world, right? It is a way to spend time, but it is not a way to get anything back for that time other than I didn't have a boring moment, or I didn't have to deal with whatever, disappointments, stresses, complications I have in my own personal life. At least I know the rules of this environment, right? I can go do this and I can be good at this. And it's intrinsically rewarding to just go be good at something, even if it's, grinding my way up.
Yeah, and I've seen positive examples where people have been able to do that, right? And there are like really hard video games where somebody might play them, and I can give some examples where they play them and then they actually do, again, but that has a finite end and a purpose to it. They beat the game, they do it in a certain way, they come back out and they say, maybe I can get past this thing in real life. Maybe life is not as bad as I thought it was, because I wasn't very good at this game when I started, and I got better and I got better and I became really good at it and I felt accomplished, and I can do that in life as well. So again, like always on Wonder Tour, we're not trying to take one aspect of a thing and make it the whole thing. We're trying to turn things around in our hands and get them from multiple perspectives. But one thing sticks out to me here, Brian, that we haven't hit on directly yet. In your eyes, what is the purpose of technology?
The question itself is almost a trap, right? What is the purpose of technology? The technology itself doesn't have a purpose. It should be, what purpose are you using technology for in your life? Like, you get to pick. But we often adopt not only the mechanics, but the ethics of the technology. Like, oh, succeeding in the game is its own end, or it is, or I'm just using it to, like we said, just to waste time, to get away from, as a stress relief. If you're using it for stress relief, that's a purpose. That's a completely reasonable thing. If you're using it to get better at something, that could be a thing. There's, the technology for learning platforms, right? Online learning is an incredibly powerful way of using technology. That's not escapism. That's a whole different thing. But that is not because I, feel like I should take classes in my life, but like I have a thing that I'd like to get better at. I think I'd like to get more knowledgeable about, right?
I feel like I should do some online modules, Brian.
Yes, yeah, that's its own rabbit hole for sure. But it's one of those questions where the question is the point, right? Are you asking yourself, what is the purpose of me using this technology? Especially in this escapism world, right? It is completely valid to use technology to get yourself a little bit of stress release and unwind at the end of the day. It's completely valid to use technology to see really beautiful, well-crafted stories and try to derive personal lessons about how to behave or about ethics or about leadership from the stories that we love. Like, that's what we do on this podcast. Like, those things are perfectly valid. But asking that question, one of the things that this movie suggests to us, right, is one of the potential purposes of technology is connection, is when people are having struggles, when they're feeling isolated, maybe the people that are immediately around you aren't the people that you need to help you out with a problem, or aren't the people that are sympathetic to your dreams and goals. one of the great things about our connection technology is that it can connect us with other people that share our goals, that share our aspirations, that are, that are excited about the same things we're excited about. And so one of the things this movie keeps trying to tell us is like, yeah, human connection is one of the potential outcomes of technology, but it's also the one that we tend to sanitize away the fastest. We've had a lot of news articles and conversations about the perils of social media in the last 20 years, about how people represent a very shallow slice of themselves. Like, yay, great, I get to craft my avatar, but what comes along with crafting my avatar is I only show the stuff that I want other people to see, and I shy away from any risky interactions, right? And so, like, one of my favorite things in this movie was the main character at one point is using emotion suppressing software, so that they're having an interaction with another person mediated by this technology, and they've got a thing that like makes their face not show any of what they're actually thinking, so they couldn't accidentally reveal how they feel about a subject. Like, that's 100% something that people would develop and use, right? That's a real thing. Like, oh yeah, I don't want to actually have a human conversation here. I want to sanitize it to the parts of myself that I choose to display.
Well, as we wind our way to the mountaintop here, Brian, first off, thank you, because you gave right there the best example that I have, or the best definition of the purpose of tech. And you just reframed it and said, you shouldn't ask that question, what's the purpose of tech? You should ask, what is your purpose? So let's start with that. That was brilliant. And I'm definitely going to remember that one forever. But number two, when you're talking about the emotion suppressing technology, isn't human development an example of emotion suppressing technology, basically, right? If you look at children, they struggle to suppress their emotions. Their emotions just come out. And to an extent, we want to learn to avoid that. But if you just continue to become more flat, more reserved, more like avoiding the highs and the lows, you don't wear your heart on your sleeve, you don't want to ever give away what's in your hand, then that can become a purpose to itself, is to be reserved, to be hidden, so that you can have that advantage against other people. And to some extent, yeah, maybe we do need to keep our emotions held back. Maybe in the middle of a board meeting, you don't want to lash out at somebody, even though internally you're saying like, you're an idiot. Like, why would you even suggest such an idea?
There are certainly situations where suppressing your emotions is a valuable skill, right? For sure. Right. That's a good way to look at it, right? It's almost kind of the mirror image of escapism, right? Like, escapism is, I want to use technology to not interact with the external world, right? And what we're talking about here is, I want to use technology to not let my internal world get out, and not let other people see who I really am, what I really think, how I really feel. And it goes back to that question of purpose, right? If you are not ever going to have a genuine connection with somebody unless at some point you tell them how you actually feel, who you actually are, what you actually think, what things you're actually excited about, right? At some point, I'm going to say something that Drew's like, that's ridiculous, I don't agree with you, and he's going to tell me what he actually thinks. That's my opportunity to learn something, right? If Drew only ever says, oh yeah, Brian, everything you ever said was exactly what I think, then there's very little chance that I'll understand what you're thinking. There's very little chance that I'll learn something new from this conversation.
And it's easy to fall into that trap when you're in this world of, obfuscation, where you have this, like you said, this thin digital virtual layer over top of everything, but this thin layer encompasses like almost everything. It can cover just about anything. It's not like a blanket laying over a bed with a dog in it, where it's like, I can tell where the dog is in the bed, right? It's sorry, I have a lot of dog related analogies.
Right there with you. That's great.
It's different than that though, right? It's like that you put the blanket over the bed and you can't see the dog at all. Like, you can completely hide anything that's underneath of this blanket in this world. And is that really good for human development? Is that really going to help us to be the leaders that we want to be, to become the best type of people, to have this character of a magnanimous leader that we talk about on Wonder Tour?
Yeah, if I had a pet that I could turn off whenever I didn't feel like dealing with it, that would not be the experience of being a pet owner and caring for another creature, right? Like, that would not be the same thing. It would have many of the same attributes, but it would not accomplish that goal at all, right? So I think that's a good example, right? That is incredibly well timed. I love that.
But so, Brian, I want to hit on one thing here as we talk about this mountaintop moment with the emotion suppressing software, because it just sticks out to me. And you kind of started to talk about it earlier, but why do we let technology keep putting us in smaller and smaller boxes? Because that's actually what escapism is. Escapism feels like it's going to allow us to go somewhere, right? It feels like it's more divergent, like there's more outcomes and possibilities and stuff like that. But what ends up happening in the long run is it's convergent. And it's like the world keeps shrinking, basically. And what you realize is like the most freedom was actually on the outside layer in the real world if I had addressed the problems face on, versus continuing to practice this escapism. Because again, the practice of escapism it literally is like, we have a big box. Okay, like I live in this big ecosystem, let's call it a box or a dome or whatever, right? I'm going to partition off like this tiny space within here, and I'm going to put a box around this. So now everything outside of this box I am protected from. And it's like, if you start practicing that, even inside of the Oasis, you're like, well, I'm not going to go to that part of the Oasis now because I had a bad experience there. And you just keep going smaller and smaller, and it just shrinks your world.
That's amazing. No, I love this image, right? Escapism is not getting out. Escapism is getting farther in. Escapism is closing off elements of reality that you don't want to deal with, right? And and it feels bigger and more open, right? I can go run around the Fortnite world, and the Fortnite world is somewhat geographically limited, but there's a lot of options of what to do. And like, anyway, I don't have to deal with all the crap in my personal life. I can just go shoot people with a shotgun, right? By doing that, I'm buying into a very limited set of rules and options and a very limited set of interactions with other people. Like I can have, the structure of the game forces a lot of what I do, and I can have fun little chat interactions on the side, but it's fairly limited. I can basically only have chat interactions. I can't have a beer with somebody in the sunshine and play Fortnite with them at the same time. I kind of have to decide. So yeah, I love that sense. So I think you answered your own question, right? But why do we do this? Why do we use technology for escapism? It's that comfort of there are fewer variables. I know what the rules are in here, and I know that it's the bad things that happen to me. It's limited how bad they're going to be. I'll be frustrated and throw my controller across the room.
Oh man, whew, we're already getting into it here in the Wonder Tour 100s. That was awesome. That's a classic Wonder Tour moment. I can tell right there that we can kind of come back to and iterate on. It's almost the opposite of our big world, small world, right? Where we talk about how those of us who are like longing for an impact, that we start out maybe like Belle in Beauty and the Beast in this small world at the beginning, wishing for something more, something bigger, an opportunity to come where we can be the hero, or we can help the hero in the hero's journey to actually like transform the world around us to achieve more freedom for more people, or whatever our personal mission is. But here we're seeing escapism is actually like the inversion of that. It's going backwards. It's like you have the big world, it's laid in front of you, you take it for granted, you simplify the dimensions down and partition off a space to protect yourself.
I'm going to go hide in this little corner that I understand, and I'm going to get good at this. And, we all do that to some extent, but to do it, to buy into somebody else's set of predefined rules about it and then just go hang out there, it definitely limits your options. So I think it's, and the other thing that, as you were talking, that just made me think of is our dojo analogy, right? Like if you're going into the small world to get better at something so that you can then go deploy it, if that's your purpose, is like, okay, great, I'm going to polish my skills, right? I'm going to go get really good at, whatever these, I'm going to take an online class in Python. I'm going to get really good at coding Python. The point of that is not to get A's in the online class in Python. The point of that is to then go be able to do something, make something work better in the real world with my new skills.
That's right.
That's again, it all goes back to purpose.